He was the youngest All-Star since Zion Williamson. His playstyle has drawn comparison to LeBron James, and at just 21 years old, he led the Orlando Magic back to the playoffs. One last-minute draft decision made this a reality for Paolo Banchero and the Orlando Magic. Entering the 2022 draft, the NBA thought it had the number 1 pick all figured out. All signs pointed to Jabari Smith Jr. Odd makers had him as a lock.
Well, there's a lot of really exciting players in this draft, but if I had to pick one guy, it would be Jabari Smith.
But just moments before the draft began, everything changed. And with the number 1 overall pick in the draft, the Orlando Magic shocked the world by selecting Paolo Banchero, a player that hadn't even worked out publicly for the Magic, a player who many believe wasn't even under serious consideration for the number 1 overall pick. It was a decision made just hours before the pick, but what no one realized at the time was that this moment would quietly alter the course of the franchise, and maybe even the entire Eastern Conference for years to come. And this is the story of how a bold last-minute draft decision reshaped the Orlando Magic and turned them into one of the NBA's brightest young teams. And just a few weeks before the draft, the Orlando Magic found themselves in familiar territory, holding the number 1 pick. It was the reward for a brutal 22-60 season, but this wasn't a team starting from scratch. They already had promising young pieces. Franz Wagner had impressed as a rookie, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, Wendell Carter Jr., all good, but none of them were the guy. This pick had to be a cornerstone, a future star, a player to build everything around. And the consensus choice? Jabari Smith Jr. Smith was a 6'10 sniper out of Auburn with a picture-perfect jump shot release and elite defensive upside. Scouts loved his floor spacing, his length, and his potential to be a modern-day two-way wing. And another top pick, Chet Holmgren, was a wild card. At 7 feet tall with guard-like skills, elite rim protection, and smooth outside shot, Holmgren was seen as the biggest swing in the draft. A unicorn with superstar potential and injury risk. But there was just one issue. Chet wanted nothing to do with the Orlando Magic. He refused to work out with them, and his camp made it clear he wanted to be drafted by the Oklahoma City Thunder. And this decision was made because Oklahoma City had one thing Holmgren valued the most, a long-term vision of building a dynasty. As the Thunder's slow rebuild and their massive stockpile picks and their player development culture were a perfect fit for Holmgren's unique frame and skill set. Compared to Orlando, he would have had to been the guy from day one. In OKC, he could ease into stardom, surrounded by young talent like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, and the number 11 pick was turned into Jalen Williams under the patient eye of Sam Presti. So with Holmgren essentially out of the running, the race came down to 2, Jabari Smith Jr. and Paolo Banchero, and everything pointed towards Jabari. He had the perfect modern NBA profile, the defensive chops, and seemed like the cleanest fit next to Franz Wagner. Most mock drafts had him going first. ESPN had him locked in, and Sports Illustrated had Jabari's odds at -150 the night before the draft. And then out of nowhere, the odds flipped. And before we continue with the video, I'm currently at 970 subscribers and I have a goal to reach 1,000 by the end of August, so you can take a second to hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. Now back to the video. How did a player who wasn't even on the public radar for the number 1 pick end up becoming the face of a franchise overnight? Well, it all starts with the man calling the shots, Jeff Weltman. Since taking over as president of basketball operations in 2017, Weltman has never followed the crowd. His draft history is a long list of bold bets. In 2017, he took Jonathan Isaac at 6, a long, wiry forward with defensive upside despite concerns about his offensive game. In 2018, he picked Mo Bamba, a 7-footer with 7'10" wingspan and potential as a modern-day rim protector in a stretch 5. And in 2021, when most mock drafts had Franz Wagner at the late lottery pick, Weltman took him at 8, believing in his IQ, versatility, and two-way polish. Each pick defied consensus. Each player had their own question marks, but Weltman was never interested in what the media thought. He trusted his scouts, his analytics, and his gut. And in 2022, he saw something in Banchero that could not be ignored. And while Jabari Smith was a safe 3-and-D prototype, Paolo was the most complete player in the draft. At Duke, Paolo averaged 17 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists on 48% shooting from the field. He led the Blue Devils to a 31-7 record and an ACC regular season title and a run to the Final Four in Coach K's final season. Under the brightest spotlight in college basketball, Paolo thrived. And in the March Madness tournament, he elevated his game even further, dropping 20 points against Michigan State in the second round, 22 against Texas Tech in the Sweet 16, 16 in the Elite 8 win over Arkansas, and he was the best freshman on the floor every time. And due to his groundbreaking year at Duke, he was named ACC Rookie of the Year, first team All-ACC, and consensus second team All-American. But the stats were the only thing that stood out to Weltman. And what really impressed Orlando's front office the most was how poised and polished he looked on and off the court. Paolo carried himself like a pro. He embraced the spotlight, led by example, and had the physical frame to contribute immediately. He didn't just score, he orchestrated. He could initiate the offense, pass out of doubles, bully smaller defenders in the post, and hit the mid-range jumper release. And while Jabari needed time to grow into a primary role, Paolo was ready now. So in the hours before the draft, after internal debates and film session, the Magic made the call. And they were not going with consensus, they were going with the most complete player in the draft. They were going with Paolo Banchero. In Paolo's NBA debut, he dropped 27 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists, becoming the first rookie since LeBron James to put up those numbers in a debut. It wasn't just the stat line, it was the poise, the confidence, and the presence. He looked like he belonged already, and he sure wasn't done. On November 5th against Sacramento, Paolo poured in 33 points, grabbed 16 rebounds, and dished out 4 assists. He was bullying defenders in the post, running the break like a point forward, and finishing through contact like a veteran. And then came January 23rd against Boston, in a statement win over the Eastern Conference's top seed. Paolo dropped 23 points and 5 assists while going toe-to-toe with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Orlando didn't just beat Boston, they outplayed them, and Paolo was at the center of it all. And by the end of the regular season, Paolo averaged 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists, and he was named unanimous Rookie of the Year, but the numbers only told part of the story. What Paolo brought to Orlando was hope. For years, the Magic had been a forgotten franchise, a revolving door of draft picks, busted trades, and rebuilds that never took off. And they hadn't had a true franchise player since Dwight Howard. National TV games were very rare. In terms of jerseys being sold, minimal. League relevance, almost non-existent. But that all changed the moment Paolo put on the Magic uniform. Suddenly, Orlando had an identity. They had swagger, they had toughness, and they had a guy who can go toe-to-toe with the league's best wings and hold his own. NBA fans started to pay attention, and within months, the Magic weren't just rebuilding, they were reloading. And they were no longer a basement franchise, they were becoming one of the brightest young teams in the NBA, and it all started with the new #1 overall pick. And the 2023-2024 season wasn't just a step forward for the Atlanta Magic, it was a coming out party. After years of being overlooked and underestimated, the Magic were suddenly one of the league's most feared young squads, and at the center of it all, a dynamic wing duo that was turning heads across the NBA. Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. One a 6'10 power forward with elite footwork, strength, and offensive creativity, the other a 6'9 two-way weapon with smooth shot making and a high-level feel. And together, they form one of the best young wing tandems in basketball. And they could both handle the ball, make plays, defend multiple positions, and any given night, either one of them could take over a game. But it was Paolo who made the real leap. In just his second NBA season, Banchero was selected to the 2024 NBA All-Star Game, a rare feat reserved for the league's most special young talents. Only a handful of guys have done that in the past 20 years, such as LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, and Zion Williamson, and now Paolo Banchero in 2024. And it wasn't a charity vote, it wasn't hype, Paolo earned it. He averaged over 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists a game, and his shooting improved, and his playmaking matured, and his confidence sky high. In just his second season, he was looking like a star for the Atlanta Magic. And on December 20th versus Milwaukee, he dropped 35 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists against one of the league's best, Giannis Antetokounmpo. He controlled the tempo, scored in isolation, and made clutch plays down the stretch. And then on February 13th versus the Thunder, against fellow rising star Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Paolo exploded for 38 points on 14 of 22 shooting, reminding everyone that he's not just the future, he's the present. And then came the playoffs. And for the first time since the Dwight Howard era, the Magic were in a real postseason series. And they were matched up against the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team loaded with experience, defense, and a superstar of their own, Donovan Mitchell. And everyone expected a gentleman's sweep from the Cavaliers. But Orlando, they had other plans. They found themselves down 0-2 early in the series, but Paolo for Game 3 exploded for 31 points, 14 rebounds in front of a loud home crowd, leading the Magic to their first playoff win in over a decade. In Game 4, he followed it up with 32 points and 9 boards, forcing the Cavs to adjust. Evan Mobley couldn't stop him, Jared Allen got in foul trouble, and Paolo was simply too much. In Game 6, with facing elimination with their season on the line, he delivered again. 27 points, 8 rebounds, and a fourth quarter dagger that sent the series to a deciding Game 7. The Magic would ultimately fall short in Cleveland, but they had sent a message. They would be competing in the Eastern Conference for a long time, and this was a young team that belonged, and a franchise player who was just getting started. In the NBA, it's often the quiet moments, the decisions no one sees coming, that can change a franchise overnight. And for the Atlanta Magic, that moment was June 23rd, 2022, when they chose Paolo Banchero. They didn't just draft a player, they drafted their franchise cornerstone. And now, just 3 years later, we're watching the decision ripple through the league. But let's just take a second to rewind. What if they had taken Jabari Smith Jr. #1 overall in 2022? And Jabari Smith Jr. is still a talented player. He's growing into a solid defender and developing a more consistent shot in Houston, but he's not a #1 option and he's not the centerpiece you build a franchise around. If the Magic did select Jabari, they'd still likely be searching for their guy, the face of the franchise, the player who brings fans back to the arenas and the one who gets to call when the game is on the line. Instead, they drafted Paolo, and what they got was a leader, a closer, and a star who's already ahead of schedule. And now let's jump back into the 2024-25 season. Despite a disappointing loss in Game 7 to the Cavaliers, the Magic didn't take a step back after the playoff run. They doubled down. So with playoff experience under their belt and chemistry at an all-time high, Orlando ended the season ready to compete. And Paolo, he was putting up numbers that belonged in the All-NBA conversations. And through the first few months of the season, he averaged 24 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists while shooting 50% from the field and 36 from 3. He had several signature moments early in the year. 41 points against Boston in a national TV win, a triple-double of 28 points, 11 boards, and 10 dimes for Philadelphia. But then Paolo experienced a major setback. In late January, he suffered a torn right oblique, a rare and painful injury that sidelined him for several weeks. And the timing of the injury couldn't have been any worse. He was gaining national steam, the Magic were climbing the standings, and the All-Star game was approaching. But just like that, he was forced to the sideline. And with Paolo on the sidelines, Orlando managed to stay competitive, but the difference was obvious. Their offense lost its focal points, and other key players on the roster had to step up in his absence. But when he did return in early March, he didn't just shake off the rust, he came back swinging. In his first 3 games post-injury, 32 points versus Indiana, 29 against the Nets, 35 in a revenge win over the Bucks. He was aggressive, redefined, and angry, but in the best way possible. And as the Magic headed towards another postseason run, they became more than a feel-good story. They were a legit playoff threat. Franz continued to evolve, Jalen Suggs is one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball, Anthony Black and Jet Howard are maturing fast, and at the center of it all was a 22-year-old star who's already been tested by adversity and answered the call every time. But unfortunately for the Orlando Magic, they ran into the defending champs Boston Celtics, finishing the series in 5 games, sending the Orlando home in the first round once again, but this was only the beginning for Banchero and the Magic. And despite being sent home, the Orlando Magic are not done, and they will be competing in the Eastern Conference for a long time to come. And it all started with a decision few saw coming, a late night call in the war room, a player who wasn't supposed to go number 1 overall, a franchise that bet big on belief and won.